The food system is deeply interconnected with agriculture and the environment. It's deeply connected to our health. Let food be thy medicine is something we've all heard for a long time. It's been used in cultures and amongst peoples throughout the world forever, but we have gone so far away from that. Food is also our most profound solution. Because it's so interconnected, it is also one of the most powerful vehicles for positive change.
Welcome to Toxic-Free with KB, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of what it means to live a toxic-free life. I'm your host, KB. I'm a toxic-free lifestyle advisor and a diehard advocate for clean living. I'm here to guide you through the journey towards reclaiming your health and vitality. From the products we use, the foods we eat, and the relationships we share, we'll explore practical tips and strategies to create a life of balance. It's time to start living your best life. We're all in this together. Oliver English is a filmmaker, chef, and food advocate. He's led his family's international development team by opening restaurants throughout North America, Europe, Asia, the Caribbean, and the Middle East. He has learned firsthand the positive and negative effects of globalization and climate change on the world's food system. Currently the co-founder and CEO of Common Table Creative, Oliver works to shift consumer consciousness to address the most pressing environmental, health, and social justice issues of our day. Welcome to the podcast, Oliver English.
I was living in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi 7 or so years ago to open a restaurant. And I'd been there for about 3 months. And one night I'd finished training the staff and I'm sitting in it's just me and the bartender, the room's kind of dark, sitting there in my 3-piece suit, very New York self. And I ordered a big steak, potato, side salad, whole big spread, big glass of wine.
Abu Dhabi?
In Abu
Do
Dhabi.
they eat that?
They do.
Like they're pretty steak.
The beef, yes. Pork, not so much.
Okay,
it's a little bit sensitive where you go in that part of the world, but anyways, a whole big spread. And about halfway through my meal, I looked at all this food and I'm like, wait a minute, where the hell did all this food come from? Yeah. And I asked our chef to come out and we had a long conversation about where each one of the ingredients came from. Ended up being over 10 ingredients from 6+ countries in the United States, in Europe, and even one from Australia, all of the ingredients. And I said, Chef, how did this tomato get here? Oh. And so we went through when it was harvested, how it was harvested, and then maybe the boats, planes, trains, automobiles, trucks it took to get it to us.
Well, and it was picked before it was meant to be picked.
Precisely. So that it would get to us in time. And after this whole conversation, I looked down at all this food and I was like, wait a minute. This food has had a huge environmental impact. And more shockingly, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but I realized that I had never asked the question, where does food come from? I had never thought that it may have a broader impact on the world around us. And I realized that if someone like me who grew up in the business, studied hospitality in school, opened all these restaurants, was so disconnected from food, where it came from, and the broader implications it had on our environment and our own health, maybe others were disconnected as well. And I found that to be the case. When I went back to New York, I started asking my friends, where are the blueberries from? And they would say, oh, the grocery store. And I was like, there's something amiss here. There's some bigger disconnection that's happening here.
Yeah, there's definitely a missing link with that. And I'll probably touch on it a little bit more because I am the type of person that could definitely rant on this subject over and over again. But
Please do.
When you bring up the subject of a blueberry, back in my heyday, I used to nanny a lot. And growing up in the Midwest, we'd have amazing opportunities to go pick our own berries, right? And I just remember the little girl, she would look at me and be like, wow, this is really hard to do. And I said, well, yeah. So now you know when you go to the grocery store and that little tiny pint or half pint or whatever is $5.99, it's because it's so hard to do. It takes a lot of labor. It takes a lot of love. And also, as you mentioned, it does have to get there somehow. Totally. You have to pay the person to drive it there. Totally. But it comes to the question of, what are we supporting in that globalization practice and the interconnectedness of that? So more about, because we'll go back to that, but more about taking a leap.
Yeah.
So you took a big leap when that kind of clicked into your head. You were in New York, you're in your 3-piece suit, you're like, I'm rocking this.
Yeah, totally.
And then something happened in 2017 with you and your brother.
Yeah. And so it was definitely a leap. I know I to be honest with you, I thought I was going to be in the family restaurant business for the rest of my life. I'm the oldest son in the Italian family, and that's the restaurant family. That's just kind of like how it goes, or how it did go. or was supposed to go. So that initial sort of inquiry in Abu Dhabi started this, like, what is going on with me, kind of this deeper desire to learn more about the issues and what was going on. And a couple months later, I'm living and working in the Bahamas to open another restaurant. And I go into the walk-in refrigerator one day, and all of the produce looks very sad, very like sad and just wilted. And I'm like, we have a
They start talking to you.
Yeah, it's
like,
very,
"Mommy,
if they could talk, that's what they would have been
give me
saying.
a nice chip."
Exactly. And I said, Chef, we have a 270 seat restaurant. We cannot serve this produce. What are we going to do? Can you help me find a local farm? And so they send me to an indoor hydroponic cucumber farm, which at first has a lot of cucumbers, very impressive, but everything is grown in these artificial like cubes, and there's a lot of chemicals inputs. We walk by the the input room, and it's just all these guys in hazmat suits, and I'm like,
Hazmat suits.
didn't quite resonate with me, but it gets
You're
better.
like, yum, delicious. I would like a cucumber right now with my hummus.
And they're like, this is the biggest agricultural export in the Bahamas. And I was like, this is a lot of cucumbers. So anyways, that I later realized was just a stepping stone to who I was ultimately meant to meet. So a little bit underwhelmed by the cucumber situation, I went for a walk outside, and I ended up just meeting this amazing farmer named Sakane. Sakane, by contrast, has a big farmer hat, greets me with this incredibly warm smile. He's got a big sort of hatchet knife. He says, "Hey man, come check out our farm." And I was like, "All right, I don't have anything to lose at this point." And he takes me to the farm right next door that he and a family that he's working with are transforming into an organic farm to help feed the local community in the Bahamas. And I spent 3 hours with Sakane. And Sakane had this infectious love and joy and warmth about him, this love for plants and soil and understanding of interconnected. As we're walking around his farm, we see birds and butterflies and bees and all these different types of animals. And there's a vibrancy that is palpable. Yeah. And as we're walking around, Sakane tells me that the weather patterns that he grew up with are so different from the ones today that he does not know what to plant because of climate change. We look into the distance and we see trash fires. I said, Sakane, what's that? And he said, there used to be 12,000 farms in the Bahamas. Now there are 1,200. Everything is industrialized in the United States, shipped in on styrofoam, wrapped in plastic, and there is so much waste that they send it to the landfill and they burn it.
The waste from the packaging?
The waste from the packaging. And then he also said that he was one of the first people in his family to go plant-based 20 years ago, and one of the only ones to not develop a chronic disease.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So here we are on this farm, and this is the first time that someone has explained to me in real life the tangible, interconnected nature of our food system. And I don't know that I fully grasped the gravity of what was happening in that moment, but after a couple of years reflecting on it, I've come to appreciate how powerful a moment that was. I said, Connie, how do we get people to see food differently? How do we get people to after this point, I was like, more people need to meet this guy.
Yeah.
And he said, and I'll never forget this, and he said, if I can feed people good quality food, we can change the way they look at food, and in turn, change the way they look at life. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, more people need to meet a farmer. This guy just changed my whole outlook on life in a couple hours. So I called my brother Simon, and he was at the New York Film Academy at the time. And he said, let's film an interview with him. I said, I have no idea how to do that. What are you talking about? He's like, well, I mean, he's 1 year into film school. And I said,
I got you.
He's like, I got you. And I was like, all right, that's good enough for me. And I told Sakane we're going to come back in 3 months and film an interview about the future of food and talk about all the challenges they're facing and what he and other farmers are doing to address them and move us in a more sustainable direction.
Right.
And that was the jump. And we took a leap. We came back 3 months later and we filmed our first interview with Sakane, with the whole family he was working with. And we were so fired up after that weekend that we were like, more people need to meet farmers. More people need to meet these experts. And who are the other people on the front lines of creating positive change in our food system who are already doing it? Who are the ones who are out there creating solutions, who are stewarding our land, who are creating more healthy food options, who are combating food waste, who are dealing with all these challenges we face? What solutions do we already have today? And how do we incentivize and inspire more people to be part of a more sustainable future? And that was our very humble, beginner hypothesis. And that was the beginning of Feeding Tomorrow. That was the initial leap.
I love it. That's beautiful. No, but the other aspect that kind of clearly came into my mind was, knowledge is so powerful. And once you know something, you can't unknow it. Once you learn something, you can't really unlearn it. Once you kind of experience the environment or have seen the scenes, you really can't unsee it.
You can't.
You can't.
You can't.
So taking that journey forward, you've got this footage. You and Simon were like, okay, let's do what? Let's pack up our bags, right? And so I was learning something about you, that you guys traveled across the U.S. I want to know everything about that experience, because I've done that multiple times and it's not an easy feat.
That was part of the leap. It's almost cliche. People are like, "What'd you do? What'd you do? Why you move? Why are you living here?" I'm like, we packed up our stuff in the East Village. We bought a used car and we drove across the country to set up our production company at our little spot here in Venice.
Nice.
And it sounds almost like a cliche, but it is absolutely true. And what happened was, for the first 2 years, it was really just, I was still kind of in the restaurant business, but really I got hooked on this idea of sustainability. And I started, like you said, once you start to understand and learn, it started to unravel for me. And I was like, I need to learn everything I can about this. And I felt intuitively like it was part of my calling without fully understanding how or why yet. I just knew I needed to explore it. And so I just kind of went with that. So the first 2 years, me and my brother are just interviewing food companies, NGOs, nonprofits, working to create positive change in our food system. Eventually, all of them start asking us for help with videos. They're like, hey, you guys are here, you have cameras, you're clearly passionate about this. Can you make us a 1, 2, 3, 5-minute video for social media, for fundraising?
And that was when you got here.
This was one of the
parts
sparks.
of the journey.
This was one of the sparks of the journey.
Got it.
This was one of the reasons that inspired us to move, or that told us that it was going to be okay. We started getting all these requests to make all these other short form projects, and then we got our first sort of investor from a forward-thinking food company out here, and he invested with us. And
what company was that?
It was Calafia. I was actually
yes.
the original founder. Unfortunately, he's since passed away, which is very sad. But Greg was a long-time devotee to sustainable agriculture, and he was really big into supporting small farms and really big into sustainability and health. And so we started getting interest in our project from all these other companies to help us make videos for them, and then also from these bigger people to help us with the film. And we were like, maybe there's a bigger opportunity here to go work on our film, but also to go be at the forefront of the sustainable food movement as it relates to storytelling. And that was kind of our ignition. We didn't even have a signed agreement yet. We had a handshake deal. We said this feels right. So me and my brother Simon and our business partner at the time, we're all living together in the East Village. We packed up our car. We drove across the country. My favorite part about this is we had a food box that we really were like into plant-based. We were really into healthy. We didn't want to stop at McDonald's and eat all this crap.
Yeah.
So we were like,
I'd be a great roadie with you guys.
You'd be a great roadie. So I wrestled an old wine box from my grandmother.
Nice.
And my old Nona, it did not go easily, but she eventually let it go.
Did you say her name was Nona?
Nona, my Nona, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
So Italian. Yeah, you know. Oh. So getting an old wine box from your Nona doesn't always go well. So I had to convince her to let me borrow it, have it. And we packed it with everything that we needed to pull off at an Airbnb. And since there was 3 of us and a bunch of stuff, we did like Airbnbs and cook. So I had, salt, pepper, garlic, olive oil, like lemons, limes, and then like coffee and tea stuff and little snacks. And then we would stop at either farmer's market or grocery stores and get local produce and make food along the way. But we were like really big into, into the sustainability journey. And we stopped at a bunch of farms along the way and we filmed and we really saw the country. And it was one of the first times where I saw the agricultural landscape of the country through a new lens. It wasn't just, we're driving through the Midwest and there's just corn there.
Oh, there's
always
Kansas
corn.
Again.
Yeah, you just kind of like it washes over you. It's just this is what it should be.
Right.
But that drive was very different once my perspective changed. And I started to see and think about agriculture differently. I was not 6 years into the journey like I am now, but it was the first time that I really started to think about our land use and our agriculture differently. But our goal and our mission was to come out here to work on the film, to finish the film, and to build a production company at the forefront of the future of sustainability and food. And that's what we've been doing. We've been to 60 farms all around the world the past couple of years. And it's our, deep, deep passion to tell stories about food and farming and how to create a healthier world through the food that we eat.
So upon that journey across America, and you went through probably the Midwest states, you went through all the like small towns, and you saw some things that were probably terrifying. I know I've seen them. My sister lives in a very small town in Kansas, and they actually just moved them away from the direct highway scene. But, you see the cattle yards that are not, farm friendly, or grass fed, I should say. And that smell, you cannot get over that smell.
I can taste it now.
It's
awful,
disgusting.
yeah.
Putrid. But then you see all the other things. You see the chicken coops. And so I'm sure at that point, you and your brother, and you said your friend, you were just kind of like, oh my gosh, this is just like fueling the gas tank even more. Like, let's go, let's rock this. We've got our mission. Let's focus on this. And, going back to that.
100%. And it brought into full view, I think, how separate we are, particularly in cities, particularly on the coast, how disconnected we are from where our food comes from. Most people probably have never been to a farm. Or most people in the cities have probably not been to a farm or seen where their food comes from or seen what driven by a concentrated animal feeding operation and smelled what that smells like. If you smell that, that ain't right. You know that ain't right. Your body is like, no.
Yeah.
The chicken coop's the same thing. The corn, the same thing. On the other side of that, you go through some of these amazing farms in Wisconsin that we went and filmed on. And by contrast, you're like, this feels right. And it. It's hard to describe. It's an intuitive, deep feeling of like, this is wrong versus feeling like at peace. And that's what I've experienced by going to some of these farms. But I think for us, it was helpful to see the context. And also in the film, we talk about statistics related to how much of the overall land use of the United States is dedicated to corn and soy to feed cattle. And once you hear statistics like that, 47% of all the land is used for food. 80% of that is used for cattle. So like 42% of all the land is used for corn to feed cattle.
Say those statistics again.
And we interviewed Gidon Eschel, who is a geophysicist and a climate scientist. And basically he said that in the United States, 47% of all of the land surface area is used to grow food of the arable land. Of that, 80% is used for corn and soy to feed cattle. So roughly like 42% of all the arable land is used for like cattle feed, something like that. Point is, it's an insane amount. And not until you drive across the country and you get a scale of it and you drive through endless states of corn, I think do you begin to, at least for me, contextualize and appreciate what those numbers mean. You can't, you hear a lot of these stats and you're kind of divorced from reality until you're on the ground and you're like, this is what 30% of our country's worth of corn looks like.
Right.
Is that all right?
Is that all right? Is that all right? But my question goes back to, well, first of all, I want to talk about, you were saying your body instinctively knows that something is not all right when you see the cattle, when you smell that smell. And it goes back to the feelings you get in certain grocery stores too, even, or certain restaurants, that ambiance, energy. You go back to the relationship that we have with something. And it also goes back to when your body instinctively knows something, usually it's telling you something about safety too, right? This is okay. You are safe. This feels good, right? So I want to jump into relationship and food. Going back to the Bahamas, you talked about food equals life. And this is also part of your mission too, talking about that relationship. So jumping back into food and the interconnectedness of us all. Let's dive in a little bit deeper with that.
Absolutely. For us, I think in the film, our goal and our mission after this first meeting with Sakane, after he explained how interconnected all of it was to me, I think our goal and our mission in the film was to help showcase how interconnected the food system is with all of many of the aspects of our lives, as well as different aspects of our society. And in so doing, I think getting people to appreciate the interconnectedness of all life and to think about broadly the impact of our consumption. We are going to have an impact. We are going to have a carbon footprint. Our consumption, what we eat, what we wear, how we travel, etc., will have an impact.
Branch Basics never set out to sell soap. They truly are on a mission to help people create healthy homes and experience the power of pure. The three founders, Marilee, Allison, and Kelly, started Branch Basics to help people toss the toxins and live healthy lives. They educate to the market to start with the removal of cleaning products that contain some of the most toxic chemicals found in our homes, and then add in the basics in cleaning with all of their all-in-one concentrate formula. Guys, I am telling you, this liquid gold goes a long way. You only need one concentrate. You dilute it to whatever you want to clean, bathroom, kitchen, I don't know, maybe your dog. It would be safe enough to use it on your dog, I'm sure. Just ask Poppy Girl. So if you don't believe me, just ask everyone that has ever tried it. So join in as we get back to the basics and discover the power of pure. I'd like to help you get started on your cleaning by giving you 15% off all starter kits over at Branch Basics using code Toxic-Free-KB. For 15% off starter kits, use code Toxic-Free-KB. Again, that code is Toxic-Free-KB.
The question becomes, what do we want that impact to be? And for a long time, particularly our food system, the standard has been a net negative impact. And what we're trying to do with our film and so many other films out there is to change the paradigm about the type of impact that we can have through our food choices, going from having a net negative, degenerative impact to a net positive, holistic impact. So in explaining this interconnected story, our goal is to showcase to people how the food system is deeply interconnected with agriculture and the environment in terms of soil and biodiversity and carbon sequestration and land use and forests. It's deeply connected to our health. I mean, let food be thy medicine is something we've all heard for a long time. It's been used in cultures and amongst peoples throughout the world forever, but we have gone so far away from that. And the food system that we have created is destroying human health. It is having a detrimental impact on the health of humanity and on the health of our country. Essentially, the food system that we have created creates an abundance of cheap products from corn and soy that become the foundational ingredients to ultra highly processed food, fast food, junk food, etc. So all of those types of foods are artificially made less expensive because of the way that they're farmed, and they're made more readily available. Those same types of foods are directly linked to chronic disease and all kinds of other health ailments. So the food system that we have created and are funding through our tax-paying dollars is directly contributing to the health epidemic and chronic disease epidemic in our country, and has been doing so for the past several decades. That is an undeniable reality that we live in today. It also impacts, food equity and access. There's a huge discrepancy in our country with regards to who has access to healthy food, and it goes back to institutionalized racism. There's a lot to unpack there, but there's a very, very real issue in our country with regards to who has access to healthy food and who doesn't. And particularly communities of color in our country historically have not had as much access to healthy food, and that has had adverse negative impacts on health outcomes in those communities. So it is a social justice issue, it is an environmental issue, and it is a health issue. And while all of those things sound bad, because they are, food is also our most profound solution. And that's what we uncover in the film. And that's what we like to talk about in the film, is because it's so interconnected and causes all those issues, it is also one of the most powerful vehicles for positive change for those issues. In the same way that the policies that we've had in place for decades have had negative impacts all the way down the line, if we change policy and if we change cultural awareness and if we change our practices, which is what we're in the beginnings of a big revolution now, we can have huge positive impacts on our environment, on our own human health, and on our society broadly.
You are talking about how food is the solution, right? How it's created, right? How it's dispersed, how it's utilized. I always think when I think of food, I think also in the society that we live in, mental health, right? All of these things encompass mental health.
100%. And I'm glad you brought that up. And actually one of the schools that we feature in the film is called Cobham Academy, and it's a public charter school. And they have a holistic approach to nutrition and learning gardens and scratch cooking. And their whole thing is schools with learning gardens have better health outcomes and have better mental health outcomes. And there's something very real there. We actually started several years ago at a public middle school in Santa Monica. We started a regenerative school farm as part of the impact campaign for the documentary. And now every single kid who goes to that school spends time on the farm every week. And one of the discussions has been with parents and with the principal that schools are really struggling with mental health. And this is something that you probably are aware of, but the farm is a respite. The farm is a place to address these issues. And so as we move forward as a society, I think we can look at farms and gardens and green spaces as having these multiple positive impacts on our own health physically and our own health mentally as well.
So with that being said, you're trying to create a community for these children to learn about sustainability, to learn about eating well, because you like to combine that relationship, going back to the relationship and food, eating well and sustainability. Yes. But you were talking about equity. I want to talk about equality. I know you and I probably have a lot of opportunity to run down the street, and I brought the platter here from Erewhon. You know that these things are coming from a farm or something that is very, very clean. But how do you create equality in the food system when a wide range of families cannot afford to shop at places on the normal of, like Erewhon or where I live, a place called Lazy Acres or the farmer's market? It can be very, very expensive at times. And people honestly, there's really a bad rap about that, a stigma. So how do you explain that? How do you create equality?
It's a great question. And as we move into a new sustainable paradigm, we cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of the past, and we cannot afford to greenwash or whitewash anything. And we will not achieve true sustainability unless we also build in fundamentally the equity component to that. And what that looks like, I think, is both a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach. I think the momentum of change that we need to see, the shift that we need to see at a big level comes when only both of those things happen at the same time. From the bottom up, it looks like cultural awareness. It looks like people saying, we want things to be done differently. We want more sustainable options. We want restaurants that are composting. We want regenerative products that have more options. And as more people who can afford to pay for these things start to demand more of it, it signals to the market that this is where demand is going. This is what people want more of. And it will become more affordable over time. For example, Walmart never used to have organic produce. And say what you will about Walmart, but eventually moms from all over the country wrote Walmart so many letters that said, we want organic milk. Right. That they eventually got organic milk, and then they became the biggest distributor of organic produce in the country. So when an organization like that starts to change, it starts to make those options more affordable for more people. So bottom-up cultural change is very important. But I think the biggest change must come from the top. The current system has been made so inequitable.
The top, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. The top meaning the people that can afford more.
Yeah. Yes. Also, I mean from the government.
Okay.
So government policy. So one of the reasons, the main reason that we are in the place that we are in today is because the government for the past 50 to 60 years has been incentivizing and subsidizing. We, the United States taxpayers, have been paying to subsidize the growth of corn and soy and wheat. at a very big scale for 6 decades.
Right.
That system and those processes over these decades have had the impact of making a lot of food unhealthy and cheap and more readily available. And by contrast, the healthy food more expensive. So it's not that the head of broccoli is necessarily more expensive than the McDonald's hamburger. It's that one is getting a lot of subsidies and one is not. So these subsidies and the systems that have been in place for decades have created an unequal playing field. So what we need to do now is we need to drastically shift and alter the systems of policies that are creating an unhealthy food system. So instead of all of our hundreds of millions, billions of dollars supporting a system that is destroying the environment, making unhealthy food, and creating sickness, what happens if we transitioned those hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars into regenerative food systems, into systems that are building healthy soils, creating healthy food, replenishing the environment? And those systems that are the most sustainable are also the systems that are producing the healthiest foods. So even if we just put the healthy, sustainable farms on equal footing with the other farms, we can start to unleash a whole wave of more nutrient-dense, healthy food and healthy farms. That's what we need to do to make all of the access equitable. Otherwise, it's not going to be equitable.
So anyone listening to this could, like, their eyes at this point could, like, all that information that just came in can be extremely overwhelming.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean I have to contribute? Like, what do I even contribute? How is my voice or my dollar, like, what is that to do? Oliver, like, are you kidding me? Like this seems very overwhelming. So to someone that is getting introduced to this topic, but does want to buy the organic milk from Walmart and say, like, yes, I want this as well, you know, what's the first step for them to contribute to this change?
Absolutely. And I don't mean to get too policy wonky, and I know it can be complex. And honestly, I think that's the reason why it's sometimes you just want to order food and not think about it. And I get it, and I'm there too, because sometimes and often all of the challenges and all of the complexities are so overwhelming that you're like, it's been a long day. I've had a lot to do. I just want to eat and not think about it and just go to bed.
And life is overbearing enough.
That's what I'm saying. It's a lot to ask of people, and the system has been set up to make you have to do the extra work to find the answer. So I get that.
Yeah.
What I would summarize all of this, how I would summarize all of this is to quote one of the farmers in our film. And he says, believe in the power of one. And that is a very, very real truth. Believe in the power of one. Your voice matters. When you go to the farmer's market once a week, it matters. When you spend the $2 extra or the extra dollar on the regenerative, more sustainable eggs, that matters. It doesn't mean that you have to transform everything in your life. You don't have to go into your fridge and throw away everything and start from fresh. It means doing what you can with when you can, where you can. So if that means you can go to the farmer's market once a month and get 1 head of broccoli, that's huge. Yeah. If it means that you get a little planter outside the front of your house and you plant a flower that attracts one bee, that's huge. If it means that you start to compost in your house, that's huge. All of these little actions really start to add up. And we asked all of the experts in the film, what are the most impactful actions that you can do on a daily basis from an environmental and health perspective? And one is just, reducing red meat, switching from red meat to chicken or fish, or certainly switching to plants is the most impactful thing you can do. If you're to normalize the environmental impacts of all of the different foods, it would be one for plants, 2 to 3 for the non-beef items, and 10 to 100 for beef. So the environmental impact of beef is significantly greater than that of chicken or plants. The next couple of things you can do are, again, eating more plants, composting, planting some kind of food and flowers in your own yard, your front yard, your backyard. And at the grocery store, look for local, look for grass-fed, look for regenerative when you can. I know it doesn't always feel like your voice matters, but I assure you that it does. And there's one one moment that I remember from growing up in the restaurant business that I think illustrates this, and I don't know how old I was. I was younger, maybe my teenage years, maybe a little bit older.
You were on the banquet stuff.
Yeah, no, a little bit older than that. I was walking around doing stuff. But one of the older managers taught me this kind of trick we had in the restaurant, and it was, if someone came in and they made a little comment, why'd you take the salmon off the menu, or are you still using plastic straws, or whatever it was. Our assumption, or the assumption I was told, was that maybe 5 to 10 to 20 people were thinking it, but maybe they didn't want to say anything because they wanted to come have a nice meal and just go about their business, which I also totally get. If 2 people made that same comment, we made a note in a little book. If 3 people made that same comment, we made the change. Because we, as a small business, as a family business, depended on our consumers. That's the same exact thing as a Walmart example on a much smaller level.
Right.
Businesses respond to consumers. Politicians respond to constituents. This is how it works. If there are enough people speaking up about something, it starts to move the needle. And we are in a very active phase of the economy where businesses pay attention if there's enough people speaking up. So do what you can, where you can, how you can, and feel good about that. I think so often the environmental movement is like, if you don't change everything about your life immediately, you're not doing enough. And we need to move away from that thought pattern, that paradigm, to being, let's not talk about as much about what we have to do about being less bad. Let's talk about how we can do more good. And I think that's the paradigm shift that we need, is how do we do more good through the food that we eat, through the food that we choose, through the farmers that we support.
Yeah, I love that. Your voice matters. And what did we learn? The customer's always right.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true. Your voice does matter, and believe it. And that's empowering. In the overall environmental movement, it can be so, I think, disheartening to appreciate how powerful one person's voice can be. But it does matter.
Yeah.
So speak up and feel good about that.
So I want to go back to the equality, having enough for everyone, the equity of it. Food security. I actually have a friend that grew up in Malibu, and people think, oh, Malibu, like you've got it all, like you're totally taken care of. She actually grew up with food insecurity in her life. And she was telling me all these stories about, the $5 family meals, and she'd be so embarrassed to go to school because she really wouldn't have enough to provide for herself to nourish, and she'd get the free meals in the beginning of the day, which is such a blessing to many children out there. But going back to food security, the population, the food system is said to be running out of land to produce food for everyone. Now, I'm getting mixed messages out there as I do my research. Perhaps you know something more, because I feel like as a society, we're constantly being lied to about everything, about what we want, about what we should be seeing.
Sure. So a few things to unpack there. I mean, I think starting with food insecurity, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of elements of hidden hunger. I think people think, oh, food insecurity, and you think about some video of some starving kids in Africa that was on the, that make you want to donate, that's been on our TVs for years. Right. But the reality is that, I don't know the exact number, but many millions of Americans, 40 plus million Americans, don't have access to healthy food, and more than that, are categorized as having undernourished.
Malnourished.
Many people in the United States are malnourished and don't have access to adequate nutrition. And also the nutrition that they are getting, even if they are, getting, a SNAP or what were formerly food stamps, a lot of those just direct them to buy stuff at the corner store. So even if people are able to afford the necessary amount of calories, they're not necessarily getting the amount of nutrients, because they're getting so many more calories from a lot of this ultra highly processed food, but that food is not high in nutrients. So you're going to continue to sort of overeat in that sense. So there is a huge issue with undernourished people in this country, and it's often very unseen. And as you said, it often manifests itself in schools. And now, so there's a number of school programs around the country who have tried doing 100% free meals for everybody, so that you avoid that kind of stigma of kids feeling like they're embarrassed to ask for the free lunch kind of thing. As it relates to national security, this is a very, very important topic. And this is something that I think should bring the left and the right together. If there's anything that we should agree on, I think it should be the health of our nation, the health of our kids, and the health of our environment. I think we're politically, and people are a little far away from that reality at this point. But the reality is that the health of a nation is dependent on the health of its soils and on its ability to produce food for itself. And we are moving away from that reality. To look at to take a macro snapshot. In 2015, the United Nations came out and said that based on the rate at which we are degrading soil around the world, so based on our current agriculture practices, how we're scraping soil and degrading it, we had 60 years of harvest left. And today, in 2024, we have 51
of basically
harvest left.
Basically alive soil that you can actually plant.
Correct.
Upon.
So basically, if we are to continue at our current trajectory of depleting soil around the world, we will be able to produce food for 51 more years.
Okay. So what
Drink
do
that
we do from there?
Precisely.
I drank it in.
Yeah.
I've ingested it. I'm feeling poisoned by it. And my question is, what do we do?
We all decide that it is time to actively take part in the biggest food and environmental revolution that our generation has ever seen. It is time that we as a society stand behind firmly the transition to regenerative agriculture, which, as opposed to the industrial system that is destroying and degrading our soils, regenerative agriculture is putting holistic farming systems in place that together build healthy soils, biodiversity, sequester carbon, build resilience to climate change, and will help us reverse that 51 years over the long term. So it's a very real situation we're in, but we are also at a fundamental turning point where we know so much about what we've done wrong while also knowing about so many of the solutions that we already have. We already know how to fix agriculture. We already know the most sustainable types of farming. We already know how to build healthy soils. We know how to do this, but there is a gap between what we know and what we are able to do because of the political will and the cultural awareness around it. But that's why we need more films, we need more podcasts, we need more cultural awareness about these issues and people talking about it.
So I want to go back for anyone that doesn't know what the word, because there's a lot of really I like to call them like rainbows and butterflies and like really like sparkly words coming out here.
Yeah.
Regenerative, biodynamic, holistic. Those are some things I kind of want to break down a little bit for anyone that doesn't know what that mean or what that practice is.
Yeah.
Kind of just give us a little layman's terms here.
That would be very helpful.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I would start, by contrast, let's look at the industrial model. In the current model, let's say that you have a field. You are incentivized to tear down all of the trees, get rid of all of the bushes that were there, all the shrubs, all the flowers, scrape up all the soil, pump it full of chemicals, and you grow one type of crop. That's the current industrial system. And to keep that system going, because the soil is unhealthy, you've got to add lots of chemical fertilizers and pesticides and just chemicals that come from all over the world. And that's the system that is responsible for the 51 years of harvest. In that system, we grow a lot of corn or we grow a lot of soy, but we pollute our air and our water. We destroy the quality of our soil. We destroy the ecosystems that support life on this planet and biodiversity. It's not great. In contrast, the idea of regenerative agriculture, and when I say holistic and biodynamic and regenerative, all of these are terms that refer to systems of farming that work with nature. Regenerative is the sort of key word here that I'm going to use because it's becoming more colloquial and more understood and actually being used on labels on food items in stores. So this is actually where we need to move. Organic regenerative is sort of the evolution of organic to the next phase. I will answer your question. Regenerative means a system of farming that incorporates plants and animals and trees together in one system that, taken together over time, enhance the quality of the air, the biodiversity, and the soil. So it's a system that works in harmony with nature, that you are not adding chemical pesticides or fertilizers to. The animals act as the natural pest control, fertilizer, etc. And that system, because it's focused on creating healthy soils, is actually producing the healthiest food. So regenerative enhances the biodiversity and builds resilience through time, and degenerative is the industrial model that we have now. So to put things very simply, our food choices can have a very negative impact on the environment and come from farms that destroy and degrade our soils and biodiversity, etc. Or our food choices can come from farms that restore and replenish the ecosystems of the planet, our soils, and humanity broadly. That's the difference.
You are painting a really good picture for us all. I mean, I think one image I get is the biodiversity, and you're like, the animals and the plants, and they're all working together. And I get like, oh my gosh, yes, the birds are chirping, and like the little bugs, little ladybugs, you just see them like crawling around. And it is a very colorful, rainbow-esque vibe. And then the other one, yes, they are perhaps using more chemicals in the air, and the smokestacks. Those are the images I get, and like petroleum and just all of these dampened images. I kind of like went off on a tangent there, as I do, but one of my best examples is another great film is The Biggest Little Farm. And they're just down the road from where I live in Ventura County. And I had a really awesome experience with John Chester there, and who owns the farm. And it was the first time, even though I grew up in the Midwest, in more of probably the farming practices like the corn, the wheat, the soy, we saw a beautiful display of how that biodiversity was laid out in a circular garden. And he described to us, visually how that works. And it is a beautiful thing. And you really don't need a lot of extras, right? Nature does it itself, right? Let food be thy medicine, right?
Yeah, and you said it. And John and Molly are so wonderful, and they've been pioneers in this movement. And we know that the food that comes from, and the animals that come from these types of farms are the most nutrient dense, are going to be the best for our own personal health and for environmental health. So it's beautiful that there is this deep, deep connection between the food that heals us and heals the planet is the same food and farming model, and the food that makes us sick and hurts the planet is also from the same model. And there's a lot of sort of nuance and gray area sort of in between there, but at a macro level, those are very, very true. So when we support nutrient dense food, when we support local food, when we support food that is full of antioxidants and full of vibrant color, we are supporting sustainability as well in the environment. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of jumping into also like, the healing aspect versus the hurting and the harming aspect of us as humanity. So I want to jump into that living longer. Everyone wants to hopefully want to live longer, but more with the ability to like actually experience life. But I do have a question that my husband and I were having kind of a heated conversation about it, because I definitely agree with everything that you're saying. But there are a lot of people, and me to myself, I sometimes become curious, in the 40s and 50s, many of us or many of our ancestors used to eat what you would like to call clean, local, right? And would actually die much earlier than those that live today. So someone, I guarantee you, is going to be like, yo, Oliver, does it really matter if it's organic? Does it really matter? Because, everyone could try to be doing everything. And I know it's more of like a social element too, but you've got to think about those questions. I hate to be a downer on that, but the people today, might be living to 80, but having the pills. But the people back then didn't have pills and still lived to 80 and ate clean, local, whatever. What do you say? What are we doing here?
It's a really good point. I think some of it has to do with probably has to do with modern medicine and people not getting, crazy, diseases or, weird things like that. That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that necessarily.
Well, go ahead.
I think probably a good amount of that has to do with modern medicine and people just living longer forever. But what I would also look at is back in those days, whatever those days were, we did not have the rate of chronic disease that we have today. You can look back directly at, yes, they may have been living longer, but if you look at the 40s and 50s, I don't know the exact numbers here, but the rate of obesity and diabetes and heart attack and heart disease, et cetera, all the chronic diseases has got to be very, 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 very low. And now it's very, 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 very high. And also I would look at the causes of death too. Back in those days, it was probably a war or falling off a building or something. And now it's heart disease. And so it's kind of this complex issue. Interestingly, one other thing that I would look at is blue zones. One thing that is very interesting that we've looked at, and actually Lisa, the main doctor in our film, turned me on to blue zones. She got me excited about them. And whether it's 40 years ago or 50 years ago or today or whenever it is, it's interesting that blue zones have remained this isolated example of longevity and something to really look at and study, I think, in many ways. And blue zones are, as I'm sure you know, the places in the world where people have been studied to live the longest and also have the happiest lives. And a lot of that has to do with their mission and purpose in life, the quality of their social connections, but of course, food and nutrition and local food and seasonality and that kind of thing. And what are they eating? How much of it are they eating? And who are they eating it with? And all those things really do have an impact. And so I would say that even though people were living less long in those days, I think the food system was in a better place. Food safety and that kind of thing, not so much. But for where we are today, we have an opportunity to move things in a new direction. We've never had so many opportunities at health while also lived in such an environment that moved us and incentivized us to make the wrong decision. So we are living in an increasingly complex, I think, food environment, one that in the 40s and 50s they couldn't have even comprehended. It is more challenging and it takes more to sort of be on top of things.
It's extremely complex. Like everything that you're going after, even the devil's advocate that I'm playing with you today.
No, I appreciate it.
Like it's completely complex and it's a mind F. I'm not going to cuss, but it's a mind F.
It's an effing mind F. And no, I agree. And even I would also stress that not stress, but just say that I get it. Even though if someone like me, I think about this all the time, I read about it, I listen to podcasts, I'm thinking about it all the time. It's a lot to think about. And with our daily lives and work and stress and meetings, and sometimes it's just one thing that you don't want to think about. And so what I tried to do is 80% of the time I am as conscientious as I can be. I'm going to the market. I'm doing the best I can. I'm really thoughtful about sourcing. I'm really doing the best I can. But 20% of the time I'm not as hardcore about it. And it's you have to find the balance between living and enjoying life and appreciating and loving food and also caring for the environmental and health aspect. And I think you can find a way to do that. But if you're sacrificing the joy of food and the pleasure and the satisfaction and the nourishment of food strictly for this little box of environmental, I think then you're missing the point.
There has to be a balance.
There has to be the balance. But the good thing about it is that, again, the most nutrient-dense, flavorful food comes from the best farms. So the sustainable revolution can, should, and must be delicious, like a great dinner party.
Like a great dinner party, for sure. So my mom was a functional nutritionist. And, many different things came up when you were talking about, the malnourishment, even the mental health aspect. A lot of people don't realize that even though you have an abundance of food in front of you and you could eat a lot, even someone obese could be malnourished.
100%.
Right? So goes back to the quality, the nutrient efficiency over the deficiency. And then also something that I know you'd appreciate, and I want to kind of stress it to everyone watching, is that she taught me something so vital, even though, I had to kind of like struggle my way through my early 20s and like learn for my own, pay my own groceries and pay my bills. And you have to manage all that balance. But she told me one thing that you must remember is that food is your healthcare. The good ingredients is your healthcare. Because even if you cannot afford strong healthcare, trust me, the food will pay you back in the end. Because a hospital bill is much more expensive than the head of broccoli at the farmer's markets. You kind of have to remember those things.
I love that. I would put an exclamation point on that. And that's food as medicine. And if we think about it as this sort of like preventative maintenance for our body and our mind, then it starts to take on a whole new perspective. If we start to look at it through a different lens, it starts to change. And I totally agree with you. The prevalent, predominant narrative in our country for decades has been eat, drink, and smoke whatever you want. And when you get to like 60, we'll give you a couple pills to kind of just keep you floating along, and then you call it a day. And that's been the MO. And that's why our healthcare industry is robust, to say the least.
Right.
What we're talking about is changing the paradigm so that every single school in the United States has a garden and a farm. Every single meal that is cooked in a school in this country is prepared by local chefs using local ingredients, preparing nutrient-dense food that is beneficial for human health, environmental health, and mental health. And every kid has the opportunity to learn about sustainability and where food comes from. More than anything, just how to nourish their own body and their own mind. Right. Not with an overt, excessive that you have to be sustainable, but just on here are the tried and true, least processed, nutrient-dense, good food rules to help you feel your best. And that is incredibly important.
And I kind of want to jump into, living that toxic-free life, because that's what I'm about, right? That's why you're here. That's why we're connected. But living a toxic-free life and being perfect on that journey. Holy smokes, what an added stressor that we don't want in our life. Again, going back to the overwhelm. So Oliver, what are some applicable steps that we can all start taking today in our lifestyle practices without becoming overwhelmed?
For sure. And I think you alluded to it perfectly. Like, there is no perfection. I'm more sustainable than I used to be, but am I perfect? Absolutely not. I think perfect can't be the enemy of good. And in this whole movement towards sustainability, we have to be thoughtful with each other, and we can't point a finger and say, hey, you're not far enough on this perceived sustainability metric yet, so then you're bad. And then people get alienated and they say, screw you, and I don't want to be part of this anymore. And that's what a lot of the environmental infighting movement has been for so long. So for me, the first and most obvious thing to do is to look at your food. If and when you can, support organic, which is not using any chemicals or pesticides generally. If and when you can, look for a label that is regenerative, which you're seeing more and more at grocery stores. If and when you can, go to the farmer's market and really asking the farmers about their practices. But toxic chemicals and pesticides in our food system are, I think, one of the most egregious things, because you're not just, it's one thing to, spray a table with a little something or put something in your hair, but you are ingesting this stuff on a daily basis. I would say that avoiding, when you can, foods that come from the industrial food system is a really good way to detoxify your life. Most things in a box or a bag that are not organic are derived in some capacity from the industrial food system. Again, I'm taking a wide swath at it there, but that's not far from the reality. So I would just really think about that in terms of what's coming into your body. But on my own personal life, I would also say that I never started asking questions about the other things in my life, whether it was shampoo or the gas for my car or anything, until I started asking questions about where my food came from. And so for me, and also part of our film, I think food is this powerful, conscientious opener. It's this conscientious, this shift in consciousness that allows us to see and realize and appreciate the impact that our choices are having on a daily basis. Do we want to support this farm or support that farm? And when we realize that our food choices are powerful and we can support food systems that are putting a bunch of toxic chemicals in our food or not, then you say, I wonder how my shampoo's being made. And then, oh, whoa, the dishwasher, what's going on in there?
Yeah, what's that smell?
And then that's not good. And then I'm looking under the sink and I'm like, ooh. Like, I care a lot about what goes on the cabinets upstairs, but I have not thought at all about what's going on in these cabinets. So I think it's this kind of conscientious shift that happens, and you begin to question things. And it is a journey. It's not perfect, but I was able to eventually find some body wash that was like made from a sustainable farm, and then my sheets. Then it's like, oh, what are the sheets made of? And it's not something that you need to change
overnight.
Everything over time. It's going to be pretty expensive and difficult.
Yeah.
But it's fun to start thinking about things. And it's like, if I support this, regenerative coffee, like that's a good shift. And you just kind of one thing at a time, where can I make a small shift that makes life enjoyable?
Yeah. It's one small thing at a time, right?
One small
Doing
thing
what you can, when you can, if you're able to.
If you're able to. Again, and to be very clear, the system has been set up to make the healthy, sustainable option more expensive currently than the unhealthy, unsustainable option. So we're operating in sort of an unjust, skewed system. So with that knowledge, don't beat yourself up. Don't be too hard on yourself. It's not easy and it's expensive. So again, when you can, where you can, make a little bit of an effort, because it does matter. And when you put your own human health first, you're also prioritizing the environmental health.
I love it. So we actually touched upon such a wide range of topics. I feel like we already kind of really jumped into feeding tomorrow, climate change, and the production of food, right? The current food system is said to contribute to 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. That's something that really stuck with me from your film. And the question also about where food comes from and how it's made. I'm just trying to tap back on some things that really hit me. The causes from and the solutions from, how one thing can cause this in your life, how one thing or one step or one purchase can cause a solution, maybe a positive in your life, right? Also Zach Bush, something that guy is, wow, he's a wealth of knowledge, but he mentioned something that we are growing an irreversible epidemic of disease.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that a lot.
Yes.
And I want to ask you that question one more time, is what is one easy way that we can start to maybe downshift that irreversible epidemic?
Absolutely. And what Zach is referring to, I believe, is sort of looking at statistics of adolescents and their rates of obesity and diabetes. And what he looks at, usually you can sort of look at predictors of adults, and it's, whatever it is, like 50, 60% of adults have a chronic disease. But then you start looking down at adolescents, and you're like 1 in 5 adolescents has like pre-diabetes or obesity or diabetes. And you're like, what is going on? Like when a huge portion of our children are getting or have obesity or are pre-diabetic, something's not right. So to answer your question, what can we do on a daily basis to ensure that we are promoting health? Everything comes down to the quality of the ingredients that you put into your body, and and the quality of the ingredients that come from what you put in your body come from the type of farm that it came from. And so I think the number one thing that you can do is ask questions about where your food comes from and begin to bring a little bit more produce and a little bit more color into your life. One of the things we asked Lisa, the main nutritionist in our film, what are the most impactful things you can do? And although there's all these different diets out there, what's the best one? And I think we can all both, we can
I was
all,
going to ask you that question.
yeah, we can all sort of attest to, there's so many diets out there.
Yeah.
Everyone's got an opinion. And I like the way that she describes it. And she says, so many different diets out there. Obviously, everyone's body is a little bit different. So something different is going to work for you versus me. But everybody agrees that getting more whole food plants is good for our bodies and good for the environment. Everybody. And so I think that is what I like to think about. And whether you are, vegan, vegetarian, plant-based, carnivore, somewhere in the middle, coming to a balance that works with you, but as much as you can, throw another fresh head of kale, throw another thing of produce, throw some more colors in your day. Mm-hmm. The main thing is getting variety of colors and variety of produce. By some estimates, we're supposed to get 34 a day, which is a lot. I'm not even close to that. I don't think we need to get that far yet. But if you can add another vibrant color into whatever meal you're having that day, add one vibrant vegetable, and then the next day add a different vibrant vegetable. Start to incorporate more color, start to incorporate more local food. You will taste and feel the vibrant difference. If you go to the grocery store and you get a head of lettuce, or you get a tomato that came from Florida, or you came from the East Coast or something, that is going to be a radically different health experience and a human experience than if you go to the farmer's market and you get something that came from 20 miles away.
And not everyone has a farmer's market.
Precisely. And you're absolutely right. Which is actually why I would also suggest, and this is maybe a little bit controversial, but frozen vegetables can actually be very beneficial.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's very true.
It's true. And a lot of places in the country, and we live in Southern California, we're very spoiled here. I understand that. But frozen vegetables are often harvested and flash frozen like near the source. So those nutrients are actually maintained and held within those vegetables. So if you live in a place that doesn't have farmers markets, frozen veggies can actually be a very beneficial addition to your meal.
Yeah, I love that. My mom, another little quote from Mama, she used to say, "Eat the rainbow."
Eat the rainbow. And that is true. And it is because every different color has different macro and micronutrients and different healing properties. And that's also one of the things that really benefits gut health, is having different types of colors and different types of plant experiences going on.
Yeah. And your gut is basically the map. I'm going to just give a little science nerd section. Your gut is the map to like everything else. Your gut is related to even your oral health. Everything, starts in the gut. So thank you for that. Here we are at the end. Here we are. I have some rapid fire questions. Are you ready? He's nervous.
I think so.
You can grab
Do I need water?
You need some water.
Okay.
It's really not that hard. But what is your morning routine? I'm very curious.
It's extensive. It is an extensive morning
Hey,
routine.
go for it.
Okay.
Probably not as extensive as mine. Let's go.
You're probably right. Make a little coffee. Then I have a journal.
Nice.
Kind of a combination of free form, working stuff out in my head, hyping myself up, working through stuff. It's just chaos. It's beautiful chaos, but I love it. Then I'll read whatever I'm reading for that day. I can only read in the morning because I'm very dyslexic, as we talked about. Mm-hmm. So I have to have it's got to be very quiet and very early. Otherwise I can't read. So I read for 20, 30 minutes and then I'll work out. Or then I'll do like a little meditation, visualization combo deluxe. Then I'll go work out, usually go to the gym or go for a run or something, or yoga. And then make a bite, get to work. It's like a 2-hour situation.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Okay, good.
We could talk about our
But also, if I don't do it, I'm not productive in the day. I'd rather start my day at 10 and I'm just like an animal, not animal, but I'm rocking it, versus getting up early and then not doing any of that. I feel not settled.
I agree. I'm a big believer that if you take control of your mornings, you take control of your day, right? Anything else that can happen.
I totally agree. Right? So big morning routine advocate.
Yeah, for sure. What is your everyday non-negotiable?
Morning routine.
Attaboy. What is one easy toxic-free habit we can all start practicing today?
Ooh. Grow some food and flowers in your front yard.
Grow some what?
Grow something in your front yard.
Oh.
Or your backyard. start to develop a little relationship with a plant. It can be a little space in the front yard, a little place in the backyard. It can be a little pot. Starting to grow something. It can be a little basil plant, a little, a rosemary plant. It can be some tomatoes, something. It has had such a profound impact with me and understanding plants and food. And when you see something growing and you eat it, you see the food that you get in the grocery store differently. And you see the whole experience changes. So for me, starting to develop that relationship with plants and with food shifted my perspective on a broader range of things.
I love it. So your morning routine was quite extensive. What about your nightly routine?
Not as extensive. It's kind of hot now, so I'm not out of it. I was taking a nightly bath, which I always used to make fun of my mom for. She's always a big bath lady.
I'm a huge bath person.
Now I get it. Once I hit like 32, I was like, I like baths now, I guess. A little bit of a wind down. I mean, I try to cook most nights. I usually watch a little show or something. I can't read or do any like actual mental work at night.
Right.
But I usually go to bed pretty early. That's my wind down.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Where can all of our listeners and viewers follow you, connect with you?
Did you say where can all of our listeners find and follow you? Because that
Olivers.
was good.
Olivers.
You can watch Feeding Tomorrow on Apple TV and Amazon Prime. We also launched on a bunch of international airlines, including Emirates and Korean and Virgin.
Nice.
So if you're in the skies, please go and find us. You can find me on Instagram, Oliver English. You can also find our film on Instagram, Feeding Tomorrow. And our production company is called Common Table Creative. And you can also see some of our other work at commontablecreative.com.
Beautiful. Thank you all for watching, tuning in today, joining us here at the Kin in Venice Beach, California. Make sure you follow Toxic Free with KB over on YouTube. We're on Instagram at toxicfree.kb, TikTok at Toxic Free with KB, and make sure you send in a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you all for your support. See you next time. All right, here we are once again. Hot habit for today is audio hygiene. Audio hygiene. Y'all need to really take part in this one. It's super simple. It's free. It's easy. And trust me, you will feel revived immediately. It's basically giving yourself moments in time throughout your day of silence. Does it sound kind of terrifying to you? So why do I practice this hot habit of audio hygiene? You're able to hear your thoughts, guys. I get more clarity and downloads coming through, more creative bursts of energy, and plus it creates an all-over sense of calmness. Next, let's jump into our trendy trends. Tallow. I know. So beef tallow, I'm actually talking about using beef tallow in your life. If you are a consumer of eating beef, great. I have 5 benefits for you. And then also I have a bonus for your skin. The 5 health benefits of beef tallow are: it absorbs fat-soluble vitamins into your entire system. Tallow is a natural source of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, which actually is shown to improve vision, bone health, immunities, and heart health. It is said to lower inflammation. It is said to reach your weight loss goals. I know, guys, bikini season is coming. In Southern California, it's always upon us. It's here to boost your immunities. And it is beneficial to prevent free radicals formed during cooking. So use some of that beef tallow that your husband, my husband, he's such a gem. He keeps me the beef tallow that he uses after he smokes a brisket. Thanks, babe. So that is my bonus for you, for my skin. So I don't personally consume beef, but I do use it on my skin. Its fatty acid profile closely resembles the human sebum, the oil on our skin, which is naturally produced. So it is made to act as a gentle and nourishing skin protectant and potential soother for dry skin, eczema, and even psoriasis. Because y'all know I'm a swimmer, and baby girl does not like dry skin after she gets out of the pool. And So as this for a trendy trend, I know I kind of already transformed it into another hot habit. Yes, I'm going to continue to do it. All right. Remember, you're doing your best and your best is great. See you next time.
This is a Kilo Bravo Media production brought to you by Rainbow Creative.